Oh, yeah. If that theme doesn't get you jazzed about what's coming, then nothing will. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Real Talk with your host, this intellectual Kate Taylor. This is HTLA Radio 1 New York. I'm so happy that you've chosen to join me for this long-anticipated premiere. If you love film, if you live film, for realsies now, not in a let's go see the latest blockbuster out this weekend because there's nothing else to do kind of way, but in an, oh my God, that was a once-in-a-lifetime experience and that 90 minutes just changed my life kind of way, then this is the review show for you. Now, perhaps I should clarify that this isn't really a review show in the traditional sense. Traditionally, the film reviewer is a character created by the studios to get you to go see what's currently in theaters. This is a film analysis show. This show is for those that I've described above, those with an interest in not just seeing film, but being part of the history of making them. I am a storyteller. I'm a screenwriter, married to a director, and we tell stories. Thus, I dissect and analyze the stories others tell so I can be constantly discovering and learning and finding better ways to tell my stories to you. If you more than watch film, if you, like me, become the film you're watching for that 90 or so minutes, then again, welcome to Real Talk. So, before we get into tonight's show proper, I've got to take care of those generous and brilliant folks that keep me on the air for you. Tonight's episode of Real Talk is brought to you by Blockbuster, your movies and games delivered, Jaguar, building machines that roar, and Calvin Klein's newest intoxicating fragrance, Euphoria. Well, at least I'll smell good as I drive to Blockbuster in my Jaguar. Okay. Please keep in mind that the opinions I'm about to express here in my show do not necessarily reflect those of HTLA Radio 1 or our sponsors and advertisers. Lastly, for all of my past, current, and future episode information, as well as forums in which to discuss what you think about my celluloid dissection, register a free profile on www.htla973.com and do some real talking of your own. Okay, just a quick on-air reply to a question I received in the forums before the broadcast. While I'll surely be doing analyses of current and recent films, I won't really be doing any just-released films for the simple reason that I tend to give away the endings and plot points of the films in my dissertations here. So I'd never want to spoil the viewer's experience or have the studios hate me. And there will be plenty of episodes in future to do so once a film has been out long enough for the majority of the population to have seen it. So, if you've missed that, Meeps, this show contains uber spoilers of the films I discuss. So, if you'd like to see the films untainted by my analysis first, do so, and then come and listen to the episode on the website after. And then we can really talk about it. So, that would be really good. Now, on with the show. Wow, this has been such a journey because it's something I've wanted to do for a really long time, but I didn't want to just do another film review show because that's all that you hear out there. And, you know, it's an I liked it, no, I didn't like it. Well, you know, that sucked, that was really awesome. That's not really what we're going to be doing here. So it took me several weeks to find the perfect two shows to begin this premiere episode with and the genres. So, you know, I'm a horror writer by nature, by trade. I'm a dramatist first. You know, like I had said earlier in one of our webisodes we did last week that, you know, you're never going to find me reviewing romantic comedies, maybe comedies, I don't know. I guess if you have an overwhelming need for that, then you post to me, and if that's what you want to hear, I'll do it. But it's just not my meat, so it's not really what I can really get in-depth and psychological with. So they're mostly going to be thrillers, you know, dramas, epic kind of adventure things. You know, the big ones, the really good ones. And I'm going to take two films of the same story type, because there's only 7, and compare their plot devices and their, you know, the way that they've done it. And it should be really interesting if, like I said, you're a film buff like me, a real one. So tonight, I chose the classic Man vs. Man story with the revenge plot. And I've got 2 really great films for you. One of them came out in 2010 and one in 2009. But I think they're both perfect for this first episode. So the first film we're going to be talking about is a U.S. release, and I'm sure most of you have seen it now because it stars a pretty big film star now. He's been in just about everything. Law-Abiding Citizen with Gerard Butler in the lead there. And for those of you that don't know, this is a story. His family he was the victim of a home invasion. His wife and his child were murdered in front of his eyes. DA, played by Jamie Foxx, was unable to bring both of the perpetrators to justice, so he cut a deal that incensed Gerard Butler, and mayhem ensues for the rest of the film as he seeks revenge. Now, the other is a film that I've obtained from Canada, and it's the same premise. It's a husband whose 8-year-old daughter was raped and murdered on her way to school, and he kidnaps the perpetrator, and for 7 days, after notifying police that he's going to be doing this for 7 days and then murdering him, he tortures him. And this is a really intense film. A lot of the films that I'll be reviewing and a lot of the films that I like to watch are on the cutting edge of what's acceptable. The foreign ones, the indies, you'll never find these things in the U.S., formulaic kind of model. You'll never see them in wide release. But that's what makes them so good, and that's what makes them so interesting. And if I could just get a few of you to see some films that you would have never considered seeing before, then my job's done. Now, everything that I review is available on Netflix. So hopefully you'll have a Netflix membership because they really dropped the price for just internet viewing now. And it's definitely worth it because it's unlimited streaming videos, and they have so much there to choose from, too. So if you want to see the films that I discussed in this show, you can just go and type them in on Netflix. And we'll be putting the links up, too, on the website for you. All right, so back to the two films. Okay, let's start with Law-Abiding Citizen. Like I said, it was released in 2009. It was written by Kurt Wimmer and directed ultimately by F. Gary Gray, although Frank Darabont was initially attached to direct, but he tried to rewrite the script too much and there was creative differences and that didn't work out. But once F. Gary Gray took over as director, it flowed more seamlessly, although it took a while to find some good screenwriters to get the actual story he wanted to tell out. It stars Gerard Butler in the role of Clyde Shelton, that's the father, and it stars Jamie Foxx in the role of Nick Rice, he was the DA, and Leslie Bibb was in a supporting role as the DA's assistant, and we're never quite sure what her purpose in this film is, but we'll get to that a little later. It takes place present day U.S. Let's see, it had a U.S. distribution initially, and yeah, that's it. It was one of my favorite films because it was I like films with a lot of action that I don't get bored, that are interesting, that keep you kind of guessing to the end. That's incredibly rare for me, incredibly rare. Usually I can tell you what's going to happen after the first couple scenes. But this was one that kept me guessing. I knew what he was going to do, but I wasn't quite sure how, so that was kind of interesting for me too. Now, the second film we're going to compare to, again, it's called 7 Days, and it was released in 2010. It was written by Patrick Senecal. It's an adaptation of a novel he had written of the same name. So he wrote the screenplay, too. In my opinion, this is always the best telling of a story that you'll get, whether it's an adaptation from the actual screenwriter's original novel, whether he adapts his own novel, or whether the director writes the screenplay himself. Those are the two ways you get the absolute best storytelling going because, the vision is less lost in the translation to another person. So it's directed by Daniel Grew, and this was his first feature. He'd done a lot of television series in Canada previously. This was his first feature, and I'd have to say he did a really good job. And it was starring Claude Legault as Dr. Bruno Hamel, the father, just like Gerard's role. And it was also starring, who else was in it? Detective Hervé Mercure was played by Remy Girard, and he's a very long-time famous Canadian actor. You can see him in tons of stuff. Anthony Lemire played Martin Dubreuil. He was the bad guy. He was the molester. And let me tell you, this guy was creepy as all get out. So if you watch this, you'd want to... If you could ever imagine yourself in the lead role of this father, and this was the guy that you confronted as being the murderer of your child, you would have probably done the exact same thing because he lived and breathed that role. It was really, really a good portrayal. So, like I said, it was done in Ontario, Canada, and Montreal collaboratively. Now, unlike Law Abiding Citizen, which was a huge blockbuster release, it had quite a big budget. It had a $40 million budget, sorry. On its opening weekend, it grossed $21 million, which is only half of its budget. And its total gross was $73 million. So not too bad, but it's only a profit of like $33 million, so that's not really that fantastic. But, it served its purpose. Unlike 7 Days, this was put out by IFC Films. So, and like I said, it was Daniel Gru's first feature, so it was limited release. It only had a $3 million budget Canadian. And right now, the only numbers I could get are its opening weekend, it only did $180,000. But in my opinion, this film has so many more redeeming qualities than that usual Hollywood formulaic crap that it's absolutely, the numbers in this case, in my mind, don't reflect the quality of the products here at all. So, now, I want to talk a little bit, before we get into the exact details of these films and before I have to go to a commercial break, the differences in motivation in filmmaking between the U.S. studios, the blockbuster studios, and even the indie filmmakers here in the U.S., because more and more you're seeing the indies tend to stick to the Hollywood formula, and that's for a very good reason. They attract the most audiences, they make the most money, versus everybody else on the planet. U.S. has this very specific Hollywood machine, and things are done the same way they've been done for eons, since the beginning of the industry. And elsewhere in the world, they experiment. They try different story structures. They try different plot devices. They try unique and unusual cinematic techniques and devices that just, in the U.S., you wouldn't get your film made if you throw those in there initially, because it wouldn't sell. If it doesn't stick to the Hollywood formula, it's not going to go very far ultimately. But to my mind, that's what makes watching films outside of the U.S. releases so incredibly valuable, especially if you have either an intense interest in film or are hoping to be in any way involved in the making of film. It's just critical to be able to do that. So that's a very important point, and why I wanted to do this show as well, to open other people's perspectives up that, the Hollywood machine isn't the only way to make films. And it depends on your personal motivation, just like the country's, why you're making films in the first place. If you're in it for the money, you're going to be a studio hoe, and you're going to stick to the formula, and you're going to do what you're supposed to do, and that's it. But if you're really interested in making good product, interesting product, innovative films that haven't been done before, well, then you have no choice but to go out there and watch films that are made everywhere else on this planet, because that's where you're going to get your really good ideas. That's where you're going to say, oh my goodness, I never thought that was possible in a film, and things like that. For example, 7 Days, and I have to warn you, it's incredibly graphic, because they don't look upon violence, sex, nudity in the way that the U.S. Filmmakers do. We're very prudish here. It's very censored. It's very delicate. Whereas elsewhere in the world, even just over the border in Canada, full frontal nudity for the entire 90 minutes isn't an issue. Male full frontal nudity, it's just not an issue there. And they don't do it gratuitously like the U.S. filmmakers do. It's definitely story related. It's necessary for the story. And violence, it's more graphic there as well. They seem to have less of an issue. The first Hostel, these are incredibly mild by comparison to the films that I've seen made in other countries. And it's just nothing there. They're blockbuster widespread releases with all this sex and violence that here, we get an NC-17 rating and nobody would see it. So maybe that's something worth thinking about also when you're trying to decide what and where you want to make your films if you're going into the filmmaking business. So this film, I do have to warn you, if you're not used to it, it's pretty gratuitous. You don't actually see the murder of the child, but they lay the 8-year-old's body all battered and bruised and exposed in the field after having laid there for 24 hours. Brilliant makeup job. Oh, and it's worth mentioning that Law Abiding Citizen, while it might have made a little more money, 7 Days was nominated for 9 awards for sound and makeup and story and adaptation, and supporting actor for the molester character. So it's, that says something. That says something. You have these 2 huge movie stars in this Hollywood film, same premise, same story, quadruple the budget that this film had, not 1 award nomination. But this one, 9 award nominations, and it's just a small indie film with a $3 million budget. That's storytelling. To me, that's storytelling. That's being true to your characters. That's being true to your story, not flinching, not selling out, and making a really, really good film. So, in the opening scene, like I said, it doesn't show the actual murder, but it does show the gratuitousness and the, the destruction of this poor child after the fact. When he finally does get the guy in where he's taking him to torture him, the first thing he does, and you'll think back to Misery immediately because I did, but he doesn't smash his ankles, he smashes his knees, and it is quite brutal and quite graphic, and the acting is just superb. It's just superior to, I'm sorry, we have some really incredibly talented actors here, but the actors from around the globe, they just blow me away because they're just so honest and real in their portrayal of things. You forget you're watching a film when you watch films that aren't U.S. made. There's just no comparison to my mind. That's just some of the scenes. There's some other things we'll talk about a little later, but because I was discussing them with Chris before the show, that you would never see made. And these are the things we want to do to a molester if we catch them, but we would never dare to put them on U.S. screens, And they're just bold and they're brave and they're very, very cutting edge in what they're doing. And I think that's what makes them so successful. So for that part, that's where we're going to start. We're going to go to a short commercial break now. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the actual plot points and devices and character differences and all the things that make films what they are. So stay tuned, 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Netflix increased prices by 60%, but they're not the only game in town. Say hello to Blockbuster. They deliver movies right to your mailbox, too. Lots of movies, unlimited movies. Blockbuster offers lots of new releases weeks before Netflix or even Redbox. Plus, Blockbuster has Blu-ray and games at no extra charge. But only Blockbuster lets you exchange your movies instantly at any one of our stores. And you get all of this for under $10 a month. So say hello to Blockbuster again.
When you have cable and can't record all your shows, you feel unhappy. When you feel unhappy, you go to happy hour. When you go to happy hour, you're up for anything. When you're up for anything, you head to a Turkish bathhouse. When you head to a Turkish bathhouse, you meet Charlie Sheen. And when you meet Charlie Sheen, you reenact scenes from Platoon with Charlie Sheen. Don't reenact scenes from Platoon with Charlie Sheen. Get rid of cable and upgrade to DirecTV. Call 1-800-DirecTV.
There are machines that can do things for us. Machines that can make things for us. Machines that can see right through us. And machines that want to be us. Want to replace us. But they are not us. There is one machine that makes us greater. A machine so instinctive, so seductive. It's as alive as we are. It doesn't click or buzz. It roars. Jaguar.
I always said shoes are like women. They inspire beautiful music.
But what about these?
Stilettos sound like this.
What does my fragrance inspire?
That's got soul.
My ties are beautiful. They don't need music.
Bringing the stars together. That's the magic of Macy's.
HTLA Radio 1.
Okay, Meeps, we're back, and you're listening to Real Talk with Kate Taylor on HTLA Radio 1 New York. It's 9:51 p.m. at the moment, and we're talking about the thriller genre is our first that we're going to be dissecting here in Real Talk. I've got 2 great films for you. One, it's quite possible you've already seen because it was a U.S.-wide theatrical release called Law Abiding Citizen, starring Gerard Butler and Jamie Foxx. And by comparison, a small Canadian film, also of the thriller revenge genre, called 7 Days, in which Claude Legault's daughter is murdered and he kidnaps the perpetrator, played by Martin Dubreuil, and tortures him for 7 days before, well, He calls the cops and he tells them, I'm going to kidnap this guy. And I'm going to torture him for 7 days, and then I'm going to murder him. So you have this dual device of what he's doing to the molester in this place that he takes him to. What he's doing in his own mind. His wife is constantly calling him and begging him and doing things to stop and saying, it's not going to do any good. It's not going to bring Jasmine back, blah, blah, blah. And then you have the police chasing him and trying to find him for 7 days as well. So you have multiple story plots, but we're going to get a little more into that later. Now, initially, in Law Abiding Citizen, the film opens with Gerard Butler at home, presumably after work. The wife's making dinner. The kid is playing in the house. And they're a victim of a home invasion. And these two skeezy characters break into the house, tie them all up, murder the wife, murder the child right in front of Gerard Butler's eyes, try to murder him, but he survives. Jamie Foxx is assigned to the case. He can't get full evidence or whatever ridiculous reason on both of them, so he has one turn state's evidence against the other. And this completely incenses Gerard Butler, and he vows revenge and blah, blah, blah. Now, as this initial U.S. blockbuster unfurls, as we go on for that 90 minutes or so, it's found out that he used to work for the government. He's incredibly brilliant. He's a genius inventor. He's a genius engineer. He can kill you from halfway around the world, doesn't even need to be in the room with you. And he does that to several characters along the way, because they ultimately arrest Gerard Butler when the one perpetrator that turned state's evidence in is released, is thus subsequently killed by Gerard Butler. I have to say one scene that I found incredibly interesting is the one that was convicted of the crime because the other guy turned state's evidence on him was in the execution chamber, and he was being executed via lethal injection. And we come to find out that someone had tampered with the chemicals that were intended to end his life. And it was the most grotesque and horrifying, certainly, beyond all realm of cruelty and unusual punishment there. And we find out that, this is the brilliance that is Gerard Butler's character, that he managed to tamper with these, execution chemicals whilst they were in the prison, and how did he do it, and blah, 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 and it's this whole thing. And that is the one plot point that I found most interesting was, there are people out there that really are that brilliant, and you have to watch out for them. And I do have to say that the writer and director kind of nailed that aspect of Gerard Butler's character, because there really are people out there that are that smart and that have had those kind of covert positions and have learned things that you and I could never, ever even fathom as just, average citizens. So hence the title Law-Abiding Citizen kind of takes on that kind of dual meaning too. Now, in 7 days, the main character, the father, is a surgeon. And, it's his business to save people and save people's lives and improve the quality of their health and their lives. So we have kind of this moral dilemma going on here with the character played by Claude Legault. His name is Dr. Bruno Hamel. And so initially, when the daughter is killed, we think, well, he's just going to suck it up because he's a pacifist, he's a lifesaver, he's a healer, he's got the Hippocratic Oath on his side. What the hell's he going to do, right? He's just going to take it and that's it, get over it. But no, au contraire, mon frère. So we come to find out that he's secretly been meeting with, dozens of these bad guys around town, and not unlike Gerard Butler, who we never see collaborating with anybody, kind of figuring out all this stuff kind of mousetrap style on his own. The surgeon somehow, some way gets these underground figures to help him in his quest. One thing I thought was incredibly clever, one of the bad guys, he pays him $20,000 to arrange the obtainment of the cabin-like place that he's going to take the guy to torture him. And he pays him $20,000 up front, and then much to the bad guy's surprise, he says, now listen, there's going to be $10,000 a day for you for every day from now, as long as you don't talk. If I find out you've talked, then the money stops. I'm going to call you once a week. I'll tell you where the money is, as long as I don't find out that you've talked. And he's like, well, $10,000 a day, I'll never talk, that kind of thing. So again, we find out he's kind of got unlimited resources due to his position as a surgeon at the hospital. He steals all the equipment he needs to carry out this plan from the hospital he works at. He's obviously intending not to come back from this. either, because of the way he's spending his money, the way he's speaking to his wife, the things that he does. So it kind of leaves you curious about what's going to happen to him ultimately. Gerard Butler, his character throughout the whole thing, he's actually also planning, to not be around after the end of what he's doing. He's figuring his plan is going to climax and he's either going to get killed, spend the rest of his life in jail, whatever, but he's not thinking about making a clean getaway in any way. So those two characters absolutely have that in common. Where they differ, however, is in their portrayal of a grieving father. And I have to say, there's an immense difference here. While Gerard Butler's a fantastic action actor, while he is also incredibly touching in Phantom of the Opera, he's got a little bit of a range there. I just was never, ever that convinced that he was that upset. He's doing all these horrible things. It was more like an ego thing with Gerard Butler. Well, you did this to me, now I'm going to get back at you. It became... the man versus man conflict in Law Abiding Citizen no longer became him against the people that had hurt his family. It became him against Jamie Foxx. And in my mind, Jamie Foxx was just not innocent, but he was just doing his job and trying to get the best result for Gerard Butler that he could. And it was misconstrued, and the whole entire thing was mishandled, in my opinion. Now, in 7 days, it's just the father and this scumbag, and that's it. And the grief and the pain and the self-examining he goes through for this entire 7-day period, the character arc is just immense. In my mind, there's no character arc with Gerard Butler's character at all. He never realizes that what he's doing isn't going to bring his family back, isn't going to give him the justice he seeks. It might give him a little temporary satisfaction because he's blowing up some people that, didn't put the bad guys that hurt his family away. Whereas this guy literally... his character arc is like he's doing something incredibly tangible, incredibly personal. The molester is sitting there first claiming to be innocent. And you can see on his face, am I going to do this? What if he might be innocent? He hasn't gone to trial yet, right? He kidnaps him the day that he's supposed to go to court. So we don't know yet at this point whether he's really guilty or innocent. There's allusions to the fact that he's done this before and he's guilty, but we really don't know for sure. So we're thinking when this guy is begging for his life that he's innocent, what if he is? Oh my God. So just to question anything about a film you're watching makes it a film worth watching, right? And then you can see over his, initially he's a stone. He's like, nothing is going to deter me. I'm going to tear this guy apart, and I don't care what he says or does to me. But, as all human beings eventually do, it starts wearing him down, and he starts having a crisis of conscience, especially as his wife goes on television and pleads with him to stop and let him go and come home. Because he's already alerted the cops that this is what he's doing, so everybody knows that he's got this guy and he's torturing him for 7 days. Ultimately, a little later on, the townsfolk, he has to go to the store for food and supplies and stuff. And although he does so incognito, they recognize him. The one clerk recognizes him, and she's like, I know who you are. She said, I'm with you. And then as he's walking out, she says, thank you. So it's kind of like he's cleansing society in a way that Gerard Butler is only seeking personal revenge. And so it makes them two different films at that point entirely. Right? So Law Abiding Citizen becomes just another Hollywood device. There's a lot of chase scenes. There's a lot of, he buries one of the guys, Gerard Butler, alive and tells Jamie Foxx, if my dinner's not here by 8 on the dot, he's going to run out of air and he's going to die. And, it becomes a control thing with Gerard Butler. A manipulation thing, an ego-stroking thing. Whereas in 7 days, the way the writers and the directors and the actors have portrayed this, it really is about, justice for Jasmine. And he's right there in the face of this injustice, and he's taking care of it with his own 2 hands. And he's willing to take on the consequences and the lifetime repercussions of his actions. And that's a rare thing in itself, in life and in the film, in the film world as well. Okay, but enough on that because this is only an hour show. I can go on for 2 hours, but, that's my main character difference now. And that's my main variations on the story and the genre. And some of the trite plot points and devices they use, like in Law Abiding Citizen, it's a lot of chase scenes, lots of tension, et cetera, et cetera. And then in 7 days, where it's purely character-driven. There's a stark setting in 7 days. It's nearly black and white. I mean, it's so dark, and just, except for the scenes where it's in the wife's apartment or it's outside, it's an incredibly dark, stark atmosphere and set. And Law Abiding Citizen takes place in a lot of different places. Some interesting trivia for you, though. Law Abiding Citizen was actually filmed in a real working everyday prison in Pennsylvania. And Gerard Butler said he was scared. And when they used to bring like once or twice a day, they'd bring in a whole bunch of new prisoners for booking and stuff to go into prison, that the crew actually had to lock themselves into a cell to keep themselves safe during filming. So that's really cute and interesting. And let me tell you something else about some of the plot devices were used in 7 days. Now, it's interesting because this is something that's been thought of before, but Hollywood would never, ever accept this as being done in one of their films, ever. And I don't even know how Daniel Grew got away with it, because even in Canadian filmmaking, it's an unheard of kind of tactic. But there is not one single note of music or soundtrack in 7 days from beginning to end. Not opening credits, not throughout the film, not end credits, nothing. And it's brilliant. And it was nominated for sound in 2 different awards ceremonies, so that must mean something. So that was an immense breakthrough. That was an immense innovation and advance in filmmaking in my mind entirely, and I hope the rest of the world picks it up because it's brilliant. It's just brilliant, right? Okay, let's talk a little bit about subplots. Now, Law-Abiding Citizen, it's pretty straightforward. You know, it's your typical, guy's out seeking revenge. Here's the guy he's after, blah, blah, blah. It's chases, it's this, it's that. There's very little character arc to Gerard Butler, so there's very little subplot. The only possible subplot I see is between the Leslie Bibb character, who plays Jamie Foxx's assistant, right up to the very end, and I'm sure everybody's already seen this. I'm so loath to give away spoilers too, because I want you to go out and see these films and hear what I say and see for yourself whether you agree or disagree. But up until the point where she's no longer part of the film, I'll just say it like that, you're not sure. Maybe she's the one that's helping Gerard Butler, or maybe she is genuinely on Jamie Foxx's side. We're really never sure at that point. 7 days, however, is filled with subplot, and it goes all the way from his own guilt, because initially it was Jasmine's birthday and she was going to deliver some birthday party invitations before school. He's a surgeon. He worked the late rotation. He wanted to go and walk with her to deliver these invitations, but the wife, never having any kind of alone time with him because he's always working, convinced him otherwise to stay home and have an intimate kind of rendezvous while she walked to school. And it was during their intimate time together that the child was murdered. And so, he kind of blames the wife for doing that when he could have gone with the daughter. And she kind of talked him out of it. And she blames him because the school had called a little while after the school day started to report that Jasmine hadn't arrived at school. But he never picked up the message because he was tired and he was sleeping. And so they blame each other. So there's this husband and wife tension now. And then he's got the molester captive in the cabin and calling his wife and telling his wife what he's doing to the molester and asking her, what should I do to him next? What do you want me to do to him next? Now, I know I'd have some pretty specific answers if that were my husband. But she's trying to talk him out of it. And, she's realizing it's not going to bring the daughter back. And, it's just going to end his life in a horrible way, one way or another. And, how do you come back from something like that and things like that. Now, there's another even more brilliant subplot to 7 days. The detective character that I had mentioned earlier, the film actually opens with nothing to do with the Hamill family. It opens with an old man sitting in front of a television eating a TV dinner, watching a surveillance tape from a convenience store of a robbery where a young kid comes in, holds up the convenience store, shoots a woman customer, takes $58 out of the drawer, and takes off. And the old man is watching this over and over and over again. And we come to learn a little later on, after he kidnaps the molester, and he's alerted the cops that this is his intention, 7 days of torture, and then he's going to kill him. That the detective in the tape, the woman in the tape the detective is watching was his wife. And she was murdered in that convenience store robbery. So the detective calls him and he says, I know exactly how you feel. And the father's like, no, you can't have any idea, blah, blah, blah. And the detective's like, well, actually, no, my wife was murdered, $58. And, he's like, well, didn't you want to kill him or didn't you kill him? And the detective's like, no. So he says, where is she now? Where is he now? And he says he's in jail. So this is where the character arc really starts to take a huge leap, because the detective tells him, Bruno says to the detective, well, okay, so he's in jail, your wife's dead, you're sitting alone in the bed, now you don't even have satisfaction. I mean, how is that satisfying to you, to know that someone murdered your wife and you did nothing about it? Because what good is jail? He's still alive, he's having his 3 meals a day, he's playing checkers and watching TV. How is that, justice? How is that whatever? And the detective's like, well, in my mind, that wouldn't have been justice. What's happening right now is justice. If I had done that, it would have been, vengeance, and there's an entirely different thing. So you first see that flash go across Bruno's eyes like, maybe this isn't the right decision. So that's just a couple of the subplots in 7 Days. And as you can already see, by the lack of subplots I'm talking about in Law Abiding Citizen, because there aren't any, this makes for a more in-depth kind of film. It makes for a more interesting, more complex, more true to life, because isn't life really complex, film than anything Hollywood puts out, even at a $70 million budget. It's all, there's that incredible dichotomy. You can just draw a line down the middle between U.S. films and everything else because of that. So, now I want to talk just briefly about some of the key points in both of these films that define it, pre-climax. So currently in Law Abiding Citizen, it escalates the violence against the people. And as the storyline goes on in Law Abiding Citizen, where there isn't a character arc, there is a story arc. Because you start seeing more and more people that Gerard Butler wants to get even with all of a sudden. It's not just the two guys that killed his family. It starts out with Jamie Foxx, the DA. And heinously, and it's quite, let me talk about this. There is one incredible similarity between both Law Abiding Citizen and 7 Days. They both take the perpetrator, give them a paralyzing agent, and, just to keep them physiologically paralyzed, but consciously, psychologically, and conscious. And they both torture them and do something different. Interestingly enough, it was noted by a doctor after Law Abiding Citizen came out that the way they did it was completely wrong. If Gerard Butler really had given him a paralytic agent, he wouldn't have been flopping around on the table like a dying fish. Whereas in 7 Days, he gives him, and he doesn't ever talk to the molester. He shows him the bottle of the paralytic agent, and then he puts a note in front of his face. And the note says, I'm going to give you this, and this is going to make your motor senses stop, but you're still going to be fully awake. So right then and there, it's like, oh, crap, something bad is coming. He winds up giving the guy a colonoscopy and all that stuff, but the things that the surgeon can do, completely different. I can't even remember. I think he castrates Gerard Butler or something. He does something to him while he's, in that paralytic state. But it's not even, like I said, you cannot compare the gratuitous nature of the things that they put in foreign film and film made elsewhere. You just won't find that stuff in U.S. films, and it's so true to life. And it's actually the cover of the DVD case. The guy's laying there paralyzed, tied to the table, and the surgeon puts the picture of his daughter right above where he's going to make the incision on this guy while he's still awake but can't move. So again, it's an even more, poignant kind of deal. So he wakes up from that, and after the operation and all this stuff, this is when the molester actually starts realizing that, oh my God, I'm going to have to do, this guy's going to kill me. This is it. I'm just going to be tortured endlessly. And, how much more pain can I take? There's several other things that the doctor does to him in there. I won't tell you. I'll let you see for yourself. But he confesses. And not only does he confess, but he confesses to the murder of 3 other little girls that the police don't even know about. So now we all want him dead. Right? It's not just, it doesn't just become an issue of whether, this father's doing the right thing anymore. Now we know he's probably saving future little girls, and oh my God, we want him dead. Because the way he does it, like I said, it's so creepy. It's so awesome. You have to see the acting. It's just brilliant. But there just isn't any other key point in Law Abiding Citizen except for, once he kills a couple people, there's a couple more on the list all of a sudden. Like he's mad at the mayor now. And, it's like the guy down the block didn't deliver his something on time, and now he's going to get... It just becomes ludicrous at one point. It's just like more and more people for him to kill just to keep the movie going. So to me, that's not an arc. That's not, a climactic lead-in. to what's going on. That's just, it's just a device to keep the movie going for as long as it needs to be going for a theatrical release, and that's it. And the ending, I have to say, though, the ending in both films, I was a little disappointed. But that's me. I'm very hard to please in general. So we'll talk about that later. But, yes, absolutely. So, again, let's get back to a little bit more about the character arc. So now we've got the surgeon, because Gerard Butler doesn't change for the whole entire damn movie. He never once thinks that what he's doing is wrong. He doesn't think, any of it. He's on a mission. That's it. He got the script, and he's doing the script to the T, and that's pretty much the film. It's interesting by way of soundtrack and pacing, absolutely, and some of the more explosive scenes and chase scenes, but that's pretty much it. Whereas 7 Days, this arc is tangible, and it's palpable, and it's character driven, and it's story driven, and it's an entirely different animal. So now we're seeing, after he speaks to the detective, that maybe this isn't the best thing to do. Maybe I should have thought a little bit more about this. And kind of starts having a change of heart, but he gets that resolve back because this guy is just such a scumbag. You just really, the things he says, and he says F you in English. By the way, I'm sorry to say that 7 Days is in French, but it is subtitled, so it's okay. It makes it even more interesting to me. But it's subtitled. Don't worry about it. And you don't really need to know what they're saying to see what's going on anyway. But so the wife goes on TV and starts pleading for him to stop and to come home, and and he's just more resolved. Then he starts getting angry with her, and then we see that subplot explode because they just start screaming at each other on the phone. Well, if you had walked her, blah blah blah. Well, if you didn't want to have sex, while you were having your orgasm, she was being murdered, blah blah. So it was like, oh my God, and it was intense, and it was very, very well acted and very well done because you really feel these two people's pain.